With me now is another witness. You're a college student nearby. Tell me what you saw and heard just a short time ago. Did you actually hear the gunfire, see gunfire?
Yeah, when I was in the bridge between the Chambers Street and the Stuyvesant Street, so I was on the bridge. I saw a guy who's like had two guns on his hand, and he was just running in the middle of the street. And then I heard like 5-6 gunshots, and that time I was down because I didn't know which part the gunshots coming from. So I was scared, and there's like 4 or 5 students more on the bridge. They're all scared. So when I again watched in the screen, I saw the guy with the 2 guns. He was in the street. So I guess the cop shot maybe.
Did you see him fire, the man with these 2 guns?
I didn't see him shooting someone, but he was in the guns with the hand. But he was running around like he was like this, but he didn't shot anyone. I didn't see that part.
A gun in each hand.
Yeah. He had 2 guns.
What happened to that man?
I saw him after the 5-6 gunshot. I saw him on the ground, and the cops took him. And yeah, the cops were with him.
Did you see anyone shot?
No, I didn't see anyone got shot.
Did you see where this man came from? Did he come from? I've heard one eyewitness told me he appeared to exit a truck with a Home Depot logo.
Yeah, when I saw the truck was like a hit by something. That time I went there. What happened to see? Then I saw the guys running around. So the students of this Stuyvesant, they told me like the guy came out from the truck.
What's your name?
Tawhid Kabir.
And you're a student nearby.
PMCC.
Okay, thank you for speaking with us.
Glenn Hobbs was initiated into a satanic coven as a child by his grandfather and continued participating for many years. I recently asked Glenn about his involvement and the importance of Halloween to the occultist.
Well, my involvement in satanic worship was, I was involved in it as a child. Of course, I was a generational Satanist, what they call a generational Satanist, and what that means is that my family was involved in it and their family before them. Now, my earliest rememberings of Halloween and some of the things that were involved it was a very dark time for me as a child. It was something that I didn't enjoy.
Glenn, could you tell us about your involvement in any rituals at Halloween as a child?
There was another little girl that was involved in the occult with me, and her name was Becky. Now, Becky was a different type of child. She was blessed to be a sacrifice. I was being blessed to be a high priest, where she was being blessed and born into the coven there to be a sacrifice. Now, we were in a ritual where we were married together. It was a marriage to the beast, and me and the little girl were married together, and there was a lot of sexual abuse that took place and a lot of blood that was spilt over us, joining us together.
When do Halloween rituals actually begin, and what is the ultimate purpose of Halloween?
Well, the ritual that I remember the most clearly began about the end of September. Me and the little girl, the one I mentioned named Becky, the abuse was very concentrated at that time. We were taken into several rooms where our clothing was removed. We spent the next couple of weeks in a kind of a shack where a lot of rituals went on, where a lot of animals were killed. They summoned Lucifer and his spirit to come and possess me, and so that I would be blessed to take over the position of the high priest at a certain point in time. Now, Halloween night, they had again put me and the little girl in the back of this van, and we again drove off, which seemed like for a long time. We were drugged once again, and we finally came to this stop. They took the little girl out and they left me in the van. I could hear a lot of commotion that was going on outside. People that were screaming and yelling, and this low murmuring and a moaning noise that was going on, like some kind of a low chanting noise that was going on. So I knew in my mind there was some type of a ritual going on, because I'd heard that many times before. You know, it was real common to see people fall on the ground and convulse and go into convulsions during rituals and stuff with the demonic presence that were around. And finally, a woman came to the back of the van and she said, "It's time to go." And she brought me out of the van, and I could see that there was just a lot of people around. Some were dressed in dark brownish kind of robes with hoods over them. They took me up and they led me up to this stone altar. And I remember I saw the little girl, and she was on the altar. Now at first, you know, I just wondered what was going on, because you never knew. I mean, they used the altar for a lot of different things. They could have just been sacrificing an animal over, could have been a sexual abuse from the high priest on to her. You know, it was a hard thing to know for sure. Well, they ushered me up to the altar, and I could see that they had bound her feet. They had her feet spread apart, her legs, and they had bound them to the ends of the altar, and they had taken her arms, which were laying out this way, and roped them to the altar, which had little kind of like hooks, which they could bind the ropes around. And she was really white. Just I remember seeing her, and she was just real pale and real white. And I noticed that they had slit the bottoms of her feet and her wrists, and they were taking the blood that was running out of those areas and putting them into chalices and passing those cups around to different people who were partaking of her blood. Then the high priest, he took the athami, or the ritual knife, and he picked it up and he put my hand on it, and then he forced it into her chest. So when I think back on Halloween, you know, over that period of time that happened, you know, that was the climax event, Halloween night, where they killed that innocent little girl. And this is something that's happening every Halloween. That's not just an isolated event. I mean, there are children all over the world who are losing their lives during Halloween night, and yet we, as a society, we go out and celebrate it, and we go door to door and we ask for candy, and it's a big celebration to us. And I think it's quite ironic how one group of people are thinking it's fun, and another group of people are taking human life, and yet they don't, you know, there seems to be this wall and nobody wants to face the facts of what's really going on.
Trick or treat! Oh my goodness! Hi there. And who are you? The vampire. Dracula's wife.
While there are some people who may be concerned about the origins of Halloween and its focus on blood, death, horror, and the occult, to millions of youngsters across the nation, it has been adopted as a time to pursue scary fun. It is an opportunity to dress up in ghoulish or fanciful costumes, to engage in the fantasy of being a witch or a vampire, ghost, or devil. Eager trick-or-treaters solicit candy door to door or bob for apples at Halloween parties. Others brave haunted houses and horror movie marathons, while the more daring visit cemeteries at midnight, play with Ouija boards, and hold seances in an effort to contact spirits of the dead.
What you commonly call Halloween, in the occult world they call it Samhain. Now, when you look at the name, it looks as if it's saying Samhain or something like that. No, 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 no. This is properly pronounced in the ancient Gaelic as Samhain. Samhain, according to occult tradition, was the Lord of the Dead. Now, around 900 BC, a very fierce nomadic people came into the areas of what used to be known as Gaul, Saxony, Brittany. We know it now as the British Isle, and of course it eventually went to Scotland, Ireland, and the rest of the surrounding areas. These people were known as the Celts. Now, the Celtic people, they were so fierce and so barbaric that twice they held off the famous Roman legion and extracted heavy tribute from Rome itself. They literally held all power from 900 BC to approximately 900 AD in that area. The Celtic Lord of the Dead, Samhain, is just another name, Samhain, for Nimrod. You study all the myths, all the occult myths of Samhain. He is also a stag god. Has horns just like the stag god of the occult world that is so constant. But this particular time of the year, October 29th through the 31st, those 3 days constitute what's known as Samhain. Everyone thinks Halloween is just a one-night thing, October 31st, but it is not. See, in the occult world, this is a 3-day fire festival. It lasts from the 29th through the 31st. During the time when the Druid priest held power in Great Britain, now the Druids held all power. You couldn't get married without their permission. You couldn't hold any type of official title in the clan without their permission. You couldn't even attend any of their religious ceremonies without their permission. They literally held power over all life and death, and you're really going to find out how in this example. During the nights of Samhain, the Druids would gather at these giant megalithic stone circles. One of the most common known stone circle is, of course, Stonehenge. Just about everyone has seen Stonehenge at one time or another, be it in picture or if they were actually there. Now, Stonehenge, as I said, it's a megalithic crop circle. Megalithic crop circle, that's the UFOs. Wrong subject. But we could always get there. This is a megalithic stone circle. It served 3 specific functions. First of all, it was a temple complex. Second of all, it served as an astrological observatory. Third, it served as a place of human sacrifice. Archaeologists have already unearthed, underneath Stonehenge, over 4,000 human skeletal remains. And that's just Stonehenge. There are hundreds of these throughout the British Isles. This one, believe it or not, is small compared to some of the others. The one in Avebury is over a mile in circumference. This is just a small one. And there's over 4,000 dead human sacrifices underneath it. You multiply that by X amount of hundreds of these stone circles, and I think you'll understand what the Druids were all about and why they were so greatly feared by the common folk. During the time of Samhain, the Druids, in this example, they would meet at Stonehenge. They had a giant cauldron, a black pot, that they would fill with what you would best understand as an apple cider-like substance. They would light the pot, and then all the Druid priests would go out throughout the countryside. They would go to various mansions, to castles, to people of nobility such as the earls, marquises, dukes, what have you. They would walk up to the front door of these places, and you want to know what they would yell out? Trick or treat, exactly. Now see, trick or treat is a 2-part expression that literally sent waves and waves and waves of panic throughout the people who ever heard it. You see, if the Lord of the Manor cooperated with the Druids, he would take one of his own servants or one of his own household members, someone of his own family, and pass them over to the Druids to be used as a human sacrifice offering that night. The Druids would leave you a treat for your cooperation. They would take a pumpkin that was previously hollowed out and filled with human fat. They would leave it on the front doorstep and light it. This served as a water protection from all the demonic forces that would be unleashed that night. Now this is where we get into the trick. If you did not cooperate with the Druids, they would take blood from a dead body that they had actually been dragging around and paint the 6-pointed star with the circle around it. This is known as a hexagram, from the Latin hexer for 6. This is the foulest, the most evil of all the symbols in the occult world. I don't care what anyone else tells you. You need that symbol if you're going to summon a demon to this plane of existence. The Druids would paint that in human blood on the people's front door. Someone would die between those nights because of the demonic forces that were summoned. 4 or 5 hours later, the Druids would all return, in this example, as I stated, back to Stonehenge. Once they got back to Stonehenge, they would take these people and put them in these cages. One particular cage is of great interest. They would take those Wicca reeds. Remember how we had talked about those before, how the Easter egg landed in Wicca? And it's a very, very durable material. What the Druids would do a week before Samhain began, they would send the Celtic warriors out throughout the countryside, where they would gather up thousands of these Wicca reeds. Once they brought them back, they formed a giant Wicca man. The Wicca man looked something similar to this. It stood approximately 25 to 30 feet in height and was just intercrossing Wicca reed to where it formed the effigy of a human man. This would usually be 2 to 3 levels in height and have cages running throughout it. The Druids, once they brought back all the human sacrifice offerings from trick-or-treating, they would throw them into those cages and tie them. Now, if by some chance they ran out of space in the Wicca man, they had these regular square cages made out of Wicca that they had set aside just in case. Now, this is where the Druids now would have their version of fun. They would take approximately 12 prisoners, 12 people now, who were going to be used as human sacrifice offerings, and line them up in a single row in front of that cauldron. They would take an apple, throw it into the cauldron, and say, if you can take that in between your teeth on the first try, you will be set free immediately. Who would do that? Raise your hand. Who would try to grab that apple in between their teeth so that they could be set free? Who would do it? Raise your hand, please. There's only one problem, though. That cauldron has been boiling away for 4 to 5 hours now. The boiling temperature of liquid is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, who would do it? No volunteers? You? You know, you'd be the only one then who would have a chance of living. You see, if you didn't try for it, you were going to
Brothers and sisters, shalom. We are the brothers from the Gathering of Christ Church. Today we have Brother Lawyer, and we have another brother, Brother Benjamin, with us to deal with a very important topic. The topic we're dealing with is Halloween. For the past 30 years, the occult has moved into mainstream America. When I say that, it was one time that certain things you wouldn't see on TV. But we're living in a generation where seeing blood is normal, ghouls and goblins and the night of the living dead, seeing people killed. We're in a very deep time. Now, some of you might ask, what did that have to do with Halloween? The spirits we allow to enter our children brought forth this generation you see today. So no longer, especially those that are in Christ, we walk in ignorance and think that the things we're doing is not affecting our generations. Halloween. It seems like an innocent holiday. The story. dress your kid up like some foreign character, or some type of ghoul, or some type of television character, and have them knock on the doors and beg for candy. Okay? Haunted houses. And you parents, you do these things thinking that this is for the kid. Innocent. But is it? If you're a person that feared God, should you be doing it? Those that will dress up their children this October 31st, have you considered whether or not that these actions were turning your children over to Satan himself? Have you waited? We're going to go into the Bible. We're going to go into some history. We're going to give you a few sources from the Celtic mythology, page 127. To give you the origin of Halloween. And after that, ask yourself something you want your children, or anyone for that matter that you love, partaking in. Give me Amos 8 and 11 first. Give me Amos 8 and 11. Let me know when you have that. And we're going to give you the origin of Halloween. And see some of the hypocrisy of some of these churches. You can have some of these churches, for the sake of safety, make their church a haunted house so they can have Halloween in the spirit of Christ. So at least you know that if it's done in a church, it's safe. That should tell you something is wrong. If you have to have a safe haven to do it, something must be wrong with it. Read Amos 8 and 11. Read.
Behold, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but a hearing of the words of the Lord.
The Lord says he's going to send a famine in the land. Not a thirst or bread type of famine. You know, a lot of you out there, you're eating and drinking. But the famine is actually hearing the word of the Most High. You would think with all these churches and religious institutions that are set up, there will be a winning battle against evil in America and in the West and the world abroad. All these churches set up and the evil is overtaken good. So the famine is us hearing the word of the Most High. Why can't we weigh the Bible some of these days we're celebrating? Okay? There's a famine. And it's wrong if you stand up and say, hold up, I don't want my child worshiping Satan. I'm not going to celebrate holidays or Halloween. I'm not going to do it. People will look at you and say, well, why are you judging us for doing it? Why are you judging me? Saying that it's wrong. Why are you judging us for not doing it? Since you're saying we shouldn't judge. Why, when we make a spiritual, mind you, decision not to follow certain things, it's your family that comes against you. But yet they'll be the first to say, don't judge. But to those family members, you open up your Bible. And let's see if these holidays, starting with Halloween, see if these days are something we should be following. Okay? And after this, soon you'll have Thanksgiving and Christmas too. But we'll start with Halloween. I need you to start, brother, by reading, and this is coming from the Celtic mythology, page 127, where it says the origin of and customs of Halloween. Read everything you have in highlight there.
It says in history,
so they can hear you.
okay. History traces Halloween back to the ancient religion of the Celtics in Ireland.
So this links directly to the Celtics in Ireland. The Europeans came up with this pagan day. Read.
The Celtic people were very conscious of the spiritual world and had their own ideas of how they could gain, access to it.
So they were linked to the spiritual world, and you know it was on the left-hand side, and they had ideas on how to connect to these spiritual beings, or to demons. Read.
Such as by helping their over 300 gods to defeat.
How many gods?
300 gods to defeat their enemies in battle.
So they had to do this thing to link in with 300 different gods to come in them or work with them to defeat their enemies in battle. So you don't think about these things when you dress your children up, do you? These 300 gods. Are we bringing these 300 gods to life in our society? You bet we are. That's why the Lord says, come out of them, my people. That's why the Lord says, come out of them, man. This place has become the habitation of devils. Read.
Or by imitating the gods and showing cleverness and cunning.
Read on.
Trick or treat.
Doing what?
Trick or treat.
Trick. That sounds familiar, right? Trick or treat. That sounds familiar. Trick or treat. Read.
Their two main feasts were Beltane at the beginning of summer, May 1st.
Go ahead.
And Samhain, pronounced Samhain, at the end of summer, November 1st.
November 1st. Samhain is the day. Let's see what the celebration of Samhain was. Read.
They believed Samhain was a time when the divisions between the two worlds became very thin, when hostile supernatural forces were active and ghosts and spirits were free to wander as they wished.
Now, demons can wander as they wish and get into people. They believe this is the time of year that the demons can get loose. Spirits can get loose. And when you look outside, it's evident that these spirits are loose on that day. High-level killing, high-level raping, children being kidnapped, poison in the food. All these things are going down at once. You look outside, looks like a big parade of demonology all over the place. Orgies and sacrifices. All these things are a part of this day. And no telling what they're doing down in San Francisco in the Bohemian Grove during this night to their God. I'm talking about the high-level Illuminati and the politicians. They're doing things on Halloween too. Read.
During this interval, the normal order of the universe is suspended. The barriers between the natural and the supernatural are temporarily removed. The seed lies the seed lies open, and all divine beings and the spirits of the dead move freely among men and interfere sometimes violently.
So they calling dead people to life, to be controlled by these spirits. And it says sometime through violence. Look what happens on Halloween. Read.
It's in the Affairs, Celtic Mythology, page 127. The Celtic priests who carried out the rituals in the open air were called druids.
Were called what?
Druids.
Druids, which are sorcerers. The Celtics' high priests were sorcerers.
And politicians in this control system, again, this is why paedophilia is rampant among the political classes. This is what the Satanist confession said as well, that Australian guy. Politicians are introduced by a carefully graded set of criteria and situations that enable them to accept that their victims, children, will be our little secret. Young children sexually molested and physically abused by politicians worldwide are quickly used as sacrifices. In Australia, the bodies are hardly ever discovered, for Australia is still a wilderness. In countries that are not a wilderness, they control the mortuaries and the crematoria where they get rid of children who they want rid of because of what's happened. And it is rampant. I keep using that word, but it is. People don't realize. What happens is people think or relate the number of children that go missing every year to the number of times we see a story on the news that a child is missing and everyone's trying to find them. That is the tiniest tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of thousands of children go missing in America every year. I've rung the states, because they don't have federal figures, tell you how many cars went missing federally, but not children. They said, you've got to ring the states. I rung a load of states years ago now. I said, how many children go missing every year? How many children went missing last year? And I added the figures up. What? Never seen this on the news, hundreds of thousands. Some of them are found, some of them have explanations. Not all, nothing like. And what happens is that you have the cover-up. There are so many stories where the story of this Satanism and this child abuse starts to come to light, and immediately the lid goes on because the system controls the various aspects that can keep the lid on. This is just one example. There's endless numbers around the world. The Franklin cover-up. It was an investigation by this guy, John W. DeCamp, who was former state senator in Nebraska, and he started investigating this guy, Lawrence King, a major Republican who sang the American national anthem in 1984 and 1988, I think it was, at the Republican convention. And he was investigating him for financial fraud through an organization called the Franklin Savings and Loans. But then he discovered that he's running a pedophile ring and providing children for the biggest names in America. And he wrote this book, The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, again, they go together all the time, and murder in Nebraska. And what happened? Some of it got into this Washington Times, a mainstream newspaper, the connection to the Reagan-Bush administration, but most of it was totally covered up. I've been writing in my books now since 1998 that Father George Bush is a notorious paedophile, child torturer, child killer, and serial killer of adults as well. Said it on American radio. Still waiting for a response. And this is one example. A lady who became a friend of mine, Kathy O'Brien, who was in the American government mind control project since she was a kid, and met her many times. She still corresponds with me now and again, and I've met a daughter that she was talking about. Lovely, lovely girl, totally shattered by these people. And that's one example of millions and millions that are going on around the world. And this is what she said in a book, Transformation of America. Kelly's bleeding rectum was but one of many physical indicators of George Bush's paedophile perversions. I have overheard him speak blatantly of his sexual abuse of her on many occasions. He used this and threats to her life to pull my strings and control me. The psychological ramifications of being raped by a paedophile president are mind-shattering enough. But reportedly, Bush further reinforced the traumas to Kelly's mind with sophisticated NASA electronic and drug mind control devices. Bush also instilled the "who you're gonna call and I'll be watching you" binds on Kelly, further reinforcing her state of helplessness. The systematic tortures and trauma that I endured as a child now seem trite by comparison. They're not. I know what she went through. To the brutal physical and psychological devastation that George Bush inflicted on my daughter. And that's just one of these people involving one of the victims of this. It's incredible, the scale of it, and it's going on in this country. And what happens? The wall goes up. This is what DeCamp found. Suddenly ranks are pulled in, and the media won't touch it, the social services won't touch it, the police won't touch it, politicians won't touch it. It's the blueprint, it's how it works.